Welcome to the third and final video of chapter 4.2, linear relations. So today we're going to talk a little bit about finding missing information. So a lot of the times when we're given a math problem, there's a piece of information that's missing and we need to find it. So how do we use everything we've learned in this chapter to help solve some of these problems and find missing information? So let's first look at how to find missing information from the equation. So we've done this in chapter 6, the last chapter we did. We've done it in 4.1, so this should be kind of a review. See how we should be able to use an equation to find missing information. So for example, using the equation y equals 2x plus 5, find the value of y when x equals 3. So all I have to do is take that x equals 3 and fill it into my equation for x. And then use my order of operations. So I get 6 plus 5, and I get y equals 11. So the value of y when x equals 3 is 11. What does it mean when x equals 3, then y is 11? Well, that means that it is a point or an ordered pair. So remember when we talked about graphing and we talked about ordered pairs, where the x value is 3 and the y value is 11. So remember, the x always goes first. It's like the alphabet. So if I were going to graph the line y equals 2x plus 5, 3 and 11 would be a point on that line. I could also use the same equation and ask, find the value of x when y equals 25. So it's backwards. I'm giving you the y value now. But we solve it the same way. We take that y equals 25 and we fill it into our equation. Only this time we have to fill it in where the y goes. So we have to do a little bit of rearranging our equation to get x by itself. So first we would subtract 5 from both sides. And then we would divide by 2. And we would get that x equals 10. So when y equals 25, x equals 10. And that's another ordered pair, 10 and 25. Again, the x always goes first. So if we're going to graph the line 2x plus 5, 10 and 25 would be another point on the line. So that's all it is for finding a missing variable from the equation. We've done it before a number of times. You just have to figure out where you have to plug your value in and then solve for the other variable. So we can also use the table to help us find missing information. So for example, you can do this in one of two ways. The first way is to find the equation. So take the table, find the equation like we did last week, and then use that to help find the missing piece. So if I gave you this table, remember, to find the equation, we have to find out what the dependent variable goes up by each time. And even though we're missing that piece in the middle, we can see it's going up by 3. And then we would multiply that by the independent variable and figure out what we need to add. So in this case, it's adding 1. So 3 times 1 plus 1 would give us 4. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 would give us 7. We skip that third row because we're missing information. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 1 gives us 13, and 3 times 5 is 15, plus 1 gives us 16. So that tells us our equation is going to be y equals 3x plus 1. Then, to figure out this missing gap, we know in this missing gap that x equals 3. So I just do like I did in the last example, and I plug that right into the equation. And I end up getting that y equals 10. So I can fill that in. So that's kind of the long roundabout way to do it by finding the equation. But you might have seen when I was going through that explanation, you might have been shouting at me, it's way easier than that. I already know what the value is. And that's because you can also fill in a missing variable in an equation by figuring out the pattern. So for example, in this one, we have 2 missing spots. So if we look at the dependent variable first, the y values, the information we're given, we're subtracting 2 each time. So to get from 10 to 8, we subtract 2. To get from 4 to 2, we subtract 2. So why don't I just keep subtracting 2 to figure out what that missing spot is? So 10 subtract 2 gives me 8. What if I do 8 subtract 2? It would give me 6. Fill in the missing spot. I can do that over in the X column, the independent variable as well. If I look at the first two, I see that I'm going up by 3. So 3 plus 3 gives me 6. 6 plus 3 gives me 9. So why don't I just add 3 again, and 9 plus 3 gives me 12. So if you can figure out the pattern, you don't really need to find the equation unless you're asked to. Okay. Finally, we can find a missing variable by looking at a graph. So for example, if I give you this graph, along the bottom, it gives the number of hours worked, and along the side, it gives you the profit. So if I give you a graph, or you graph something, create a graph, I might ask, what is the profit for working 2.5 hours? So in order to solve that, we find 2.5 in the hours axis, which is the x-axis, the side to side. We find 2.5, and we go straight up till we hit our graph. And then we go horizontally to the profit axis to see where it lands. And in this case, from the graph, we can estimate that the profit will be about, so it's halfway between 16 and 24, be about $20 for 2.5 hours worked. Okay, this is called interpolating. To interpolate means to estimate a value between two plotted points. So we knew that 2 hours would give us $16 and 3 hours would give us $24, and we interpolated that 2.5 hours would give us about $20. So it's in between information we already knew. Another example might be, what is the profit for working 6 hours? So if you look at this graph right now, if you go over to 6 hours and go straight up, there's no graph there. The graph stops at 5 hours. So what can we do? What you have to do, because you know that graph's a straight line, is you can continue, use a ruler, and continue drawing that graph, that straight line, until it hits 6, and then solve it the same way we did the last one. So we start at 6 hours, and we go up until we hit the graph, and then we go over to the profit, and we see that the profit will be $48 for 6 hours worked. So because this information isn't between pieces of data we knew, like the last one was between 2 and 3 hours, and we knew both of those. Because this was outside of what we knew, we had to extend the graph. It's called extrapolating data. So it's an estimate based on what we already know, and we have to extend the graph to extrapolate data. So that's how we find missing information. So you should be able to find missing information from an equation, from a table, and from a graph.